All right, and we are live, I believe. So thank you everybody for coming along. My name is John Daniel Trask. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Raygun. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about monitoring errors in production environments. I'm also joined today by Nick Harley from our marketing team. You there, Nick?
I am, yes. I'm just here to answer any questions and help out where I can.
Yep, he'll also keep prodding me along if I get too slow or miss something important. So generally today, what I'm going to cover is a handful of slides at the start that sort of look at the why of crash reporting, how it maybe differs a little bit from standard monitoring, what the value prop is to engineers out there wanting to improve their software. And then I'm going to jump into the Raygun product itself through our demo system and just kind of give you a bit of an idea of how you can use Raygun's crash reporting product in your day-to-day development processes to make your software better. So it won't be slides all the way through. So if you're not a slide person, you won't have to wait too long. But and then hopefully you get to watch me do a demo where ideally I don't screw it up too badly. So again, thanks to everybody for coming along, and we'll crack into it. Cool. So one of the first things we sort of need to be aware of is, why do we build software at all, right? I always like to say to people, at the end of the day, even if you're in IoT stuff or machine to machine, we're always writing software for other human beings. All right, even if it's machine to machine or something like that, ultimately it will always bubble up to providing a benefit to a fellow human, fellow user. And so we really want to be making sure that we take care of those people. And in order to do that, we need to have crystal clear visibility into what our software is actually doing. And here's some statistics. These aren't just from Raygun. These are actually some numbers that have been researched at universities. Some of them are from Google, and a little bit at the end is one that we've noticed ourselves. So the first thing to note is that 75% of users tend to disengage with applications or websites if they experience an error. I know I've seen this myself. I've pulled down, say a phone app and it doesn't work. I'm usually probably going to delete it and not use it again. Quality is really important to people, so they will disengage if there's problems. So you can imagine that if we've got a lot of issues, we could be losing a lot of users. The second stat I wanted to share is that 40% of users really get annoyed if things go slow, and I'm sure we've all been in this boat. And you've kind of seen this get talked about. Google are doing more and more to try and educate the entire market on the importance of performance. They've taken it so far now that they will actually penalize your website or application from where it appears in the search rankings if it's slow. And so how do they know about that? Obviously, Google Analytics is everywhere. They're tracking all the performance timings through Chrome as well. They know if your stuff is slow, and they're going to penalize you in the results. And that's a good forcing function, actually. We shouldn't be annoyed at Google. We should just acknowledge that we should be creating fast software for people. So given this information, we have lots of errors in our software and things are slow. Surely our users will be yelling at us, right? Au contraire. What we find is that only about 1% or even less will tell you about the problems in the software. So this is something that we have noticed as we've continued to gain more and more customers using the Raygun crash reporting product, is that nearly universally folks are shocked at the sheer volume of issues that they have to deal with. In fact, that's one of the core problems that we're trying to solve at Raygun, is how do we make it so people aren't put off by the sheer volume of problems and therefore try and stick their head in the sand. And we found this is the statistic that comes from us. Before we built Raygun Crash Reporting, we built a range of different tools, and we could track how often somebody would tell us about things versus how often our Raygun Crash Reporting thing, when we were building it up, was telling us things were going wrong, and it horrified us. So these are some key metrics to always have in mind when it comes to software crash reporting and tracking performance. I also wanted to sort of look a little bit more broadly about what we're trying to do here, which is to give an idea to you about the full experience, the full range of, call them emotions, if you will, that your users are experiencing with your software, whether it is slow, fast, or whatnot. And so we want to be able to tell you not only that this happened and it affected a bunch of users, but for select people who want to, we can even help you understand who in your user base is having these issues. And we'll show that a little bit in the demo later, but this can be really powerful for things like VIP users. You know, you might have high value customers of your software you want to keep an eye on. I've even known of a company that likes to highlight if the CEO or board of directors have problems, so that the team can jump in there quickly and resolve anything they see. So it's great about trying to understand about how those people are really experiencing your software. So at the moment, let's say, and I know that we have some customers on this webinar, so hopefully you're not currently experiencing an inefficient error resolution process. But generally speaking, we have a whole range of tools, right? And Raygun is no different as a business as it will be to yours, that we've got all these different things. The information's all siloed. Some of these products have really nice integration stories, some of them don't. But it can make it a little bit difficult to really understand what's going on with your software all from one place. And so what we've sort of set out to try and do with Raygun, and beyond just crash reporting too, is build a better way. So we looked at some of the symptoms of inefficient error resolution. I'm not going to read all of these out for you. You can read them yourself, but there's a couple of things in here that are really important to my heart. One of them being the slow mean time to resolution. So how long is it actually taking your team to figure out what actually went wrong and then fixing it? So the canonical case that we have at Raygun is we push out a deployment. We do a lot of deployments every day. We introduce a bug of some sort. The Raygun crash reporting product tells us about it. With what it tells us, is it enough information that an engineer on the team can quickly diagnose the problem and have a fix out, relatively quickly? So we can more or less try to fail forward when something is starting to go wrong. That's a big one for me. The other ones vary from organization to organization, but these are all examples of an inefficient issue resolution. So what does it look like when we try and do it better? You'll be shocked to learn that Raygun crash reporting can help with this, but we've really focused on trying to make sure that Raygun can act as a sort of hub around your customer's experience, whether that's performance, whether that's errors. And as you may have seen on our website, we've recently announced an APM product, so you can even understand how is the software running on the servers. We want to give you the most full, complete picture of your software out there. That doesn't mean we're trying to boil the ocean with every possibility out there. So we have really great integrations with things like PagerDuty and VictorOps. We've got Slack and Jira. So other people in the team can also work how they want to work. So an example with Jira, we can bring a crash report. We can either make a new Jira ticket directly within Raygun, or we can attach it to an existing Jira ticket. And that way our product managers, project managers, those sorts of people can still do all of their planning in the tool that they love. And then as engineers, when we get a ticket to deal with, we can jump into Raygun and get all the context that we need in there, therefore helping accelerate the speed at which you resolve issues. This all feeds through to all of these different stages here for you, so that you can see all of these things within Raygun and ultimately resolve all the issues as quickly as possible. And what we've seen, this is a relatively common situation for us. We've seen organizations that will roll out Raygun crash reporting and typically reduce their error volumes in the area of about 90% within several months if they're really committed to trying to bring that rate down. So first you get the horrifying realization that a lot of people don't tell you how bad your software is, and then you get the great outcome that with the visibility into it and the tooling that we provide, that you can actually make your software really awesome pretty quickly, which is always very cool to see. So kind of covered the solution a bit. I always get a bit in front of myself, but I mentioned that Raygun, we have several products. Today we're focusing on crash reporting, so I'm not going to dig too far into the others, but for completeness sake, crash reporting, you can kind of consider it like your black box flight recorder. Tells you when stuff blows up. Then we have real user monitoring, and so that's telling you about the performance of your software. And the reason we say real user is because it's actually tracking the timing from, say, the user's browser or even the timing that they experience in mobile apps. This is much, much better than synthetic testing. Synthetic testing is okay for telling you if something's up or down, but it generally doesn't tell you about real-world scenarios. So you might say, oh yeah, our software loads really quickly, but that might be because it's going from one data center to another rather than to, a user on a 2004 Nokia device up in the hills somewhere with low cell phone coverage and that they're having a really terrible experience. So that's also in the box. And then lastly, I touched on the fact that we have also launched APM for understanding the server-side performance bottlenecks that exist. So that's kind of the full Raygun platform as it is today, with today's focus being on just the crash reporting part. We probably will do some other webinars coming up where we deep dive into these other areas. And like this webinar, we'll be putting this online afterwards as well for people to check out if they want to share it with their colleagues or catch up on something specific later. Cool. So kind of touched on some of these a little bit, but so there's a lot of benefits to putting in a crash reporting product, being able to understand exactly how many issues you've got, having workflow tools so that your team can work efficiently with those faults. And that, by the way, is a bit of a tangent. Frequently, if I'm talking with especially larger customers where people may be away from the coalface of writing code, I always try to remind them, we all know that all software has bugs, right? Don't feel like, oh goodness, we put this in as a trial and it told us we had so many problems that I'm going to get in trouble. I've yet to see any situation arise where folks have actually run into issues. It's more of a refreshing situation to actually have that full visibility in there as well. So that's important. And there's some of the companies that rely on Raygun down the bottom there. And lastly, well, probably not lastly, but I'm getting close to the end of the slides before we start into the demo. But Raygun does work with everything you work with. So whether you're building a mobile app using Swift that calls, microservice architected backend that consists of Go microservices and who knows, node-related stuff, Raygun supports about 25 different languages and platforms today. I'd almost guarantee it covers everything you're working with. And then that has the added benefit of ensuring that you keep all of your insight into your software all in one place. So no more having to go, well, our mobile crashes are stored in Crashlytics, but then that thing calls off to backend software that's tracked in another tool, and therefore we can't correlate the things together. You want to try and put as much data in one place as possible. And so that's what we've set out to do from the very beginning. And nearly all of our providers are also open source on GitHub. So as fellow developers, you can jump in and check out that code and either provide pull requests, raise issues, anything like that. We're always open to chatting about that. Cool. So I'm probably going to jump out here in a second because this is just highlighting some of these sort of headline capabilities around dashboarding, giving you that visibility into the user experiences so you can actually see that. Now, just to be super clear, this is an opt-in feature. We don't know anything about your users unless you choose to share it. And in this day and age, along with things like GDPR, which Raygun is completely compliant with, you have to choose to opt into this. But if you want to, you can, and you can start understanding exactly what's going on with your users. And I'll show you some of that in the demo as well. Here we go, the demo slide. How was that, Nick? That speedy enough?
Yeah, it was a great overview. I'd like to, probably move things along, get into the nitty gritty of the product, and
all right, we can do that. So, can you see my screen there, Nick? With the app?
Yep.
Awesome, cool. So, what we're looking at here is the Raygun crash reporting dashboard. Now, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here to help you understand what it is we're looking at. So, firstly, the way Raygun is built is we have this thing up here called the app switcher. And so you can see here, this is being a demo app. So if you see any PII data in this demo today, unless I'm showing you something about me, it's all just generated and fake. So don't worry too much about that. But what we have is this notion of creating an app. And so an app is like a bucket of data, whether it's errors, performance data, whatever. And this really, it befuddles a few people. But the idea here is that you can create a container however you want. You might want to put your back-end errors for a website and your front-end errors into one app, or you might want to split them up. We don't really mind. We don't price on apps. We price more on the general data volumes. So you can break this up however you like. You can have permissions around those, all that sort of stuff, notifications and integration level stuff. But really you can do it however you like. And obviously the crack creative team that built our demo system have called this application website, but you can call it whatever you like. And so once we go into an app, you can see we've got the sidebar here where we've got the products like crash reporting, real user monitoring, and APM. We're going to focus in on crash reporting today, obviously, but this is in the context of an app. And then in the middle here, what we have is this chart that's showing us the error rate over time. So this is a really useful way of sort of going, are we trending up? Are we trending down? Was there a major spike? You know, what's going on here? By default, we show you the last 7 days, but a lot of our accounts go up to 6 months worth of data. And then down the bottom here, we've got what we call our error inbox. And so this is where some of the workflow comes in. So firstly, when errors are occurring in your software and they get sent off to the Raygun service, what we do is we receive it. We then analyze that crash report and we say, does this look like any other crash report we've received? And if the answer is yes, we roll that into what we call an error group. So each of these here is an error group, and you can kind of think of it as a bug, right? So we could say, all right, well, we've got this bug here, last occurred 18 minutes ago. It's occurred 208 times, and it's affected 34 of our users. Cool. So that way, even if we're working on really huge bits of software, and trust me, we've got customers that generate tens of millions of errors, you know, an hour. So we can deal with a lot of volume, but obviously you wouldn't want to deal with tens of millions of rows in here. This helps make it so that your workload is much, much more manageable. And the way that,
just one question that comes up a lot that I know is that a lot of people, when they first plug Raygun in, get a lot of noise.
Mm-hmm.
So how would somebody maybe prioritize what to fix first here if they have a whole heap of issues?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it is a common question that comes up, especially with larger customers, and just because they generate so much data. So there's several things we can do there. So firstly, when you first put in Raygun, you're going to get maximum volume, right? And then what we find is that you end up sort of training the system. So let's say, for example, I say I've got these, as far as Raygun's aware, we've got 7 known bugs in our system in the last 7 days, right? They appear to be still happening fairly frequently. And we have these statuses. So let's say I resolved an issue. I can choose that, change it to resolved. But there's also this permanently ignored one. So this is relatively common as well, is that you might start to notice that there are what I call benign bugs. So permanently ignored is not about ignoring something that's actually really important. It's about going, no, this is noise or something we can't fix, right? And so part of that is to then say, well, I'd like to permanently ignore this particular error, meaning I don't want to be told about it ever again. That sounds like it's dangerous, and I'd like to sort of take a moment to explain the sort of errors we're talking about here. Let's pick on JavaScript, right? I think everybody is fairly aware that JavaScript, especially inside the browser, you know, there's lots of errors that occur in there. Oftentimes they are benign. A few things that people don't realize. One is that all of your browser extensions run inside the context of the web page that is yours. So that means if an error comes out of an extension, it will probably come into Raygun because it looks like it happened in your page. Similarly, people love their ad blockers these days. So you might have something like a like button or a tweet this button on the page, but because somebody's blocked that script, you might get you know, a null exception occur because some of these things are not defined because the script wasn't available. Obviously, you're not going to, quote unquote, go and fix this stuff by, you know, stopping blockers from working or fixing all the bugs and extensions. And so you could permanently ignore them once you've had a bit of an investigation in there. Also, we have these inbound filters. And so just to be clear as well, unlike some tools out there, everybody gets permanently ignored when you pay for Raygun. So you could have the smallest plan to the largest one. You can choose to filter out the noise. And then we also have this, which is also available to everyone, which is the ability to filter all the data as it comes in. So this allows us to set up rules like not wanting to get any errors that come from our sign-in page. We might want to turn on to exclude any errors that come from known bots that generate traffic on our site. Also, this one here is a really big one. So in JavaScript, you quite frequently will get errors that say things like script error and nothing else. Well, script error is actually an error that occurs in a script that's being loaded from another domain. And if you haven't set up cross-domain or cross-origin policies for this, it can tell you nothing even if it's just coming from your own CDN. So a common situation here is that people start getting script errors. There's nothing useful in the error report. Once they've realized that these aren't coming from their own scripts, it's pretty safe to go and turn those errors off. And that also improves the signal to noise ratio when using Raygun's crash reporting product in here. So there are some of the most obvious ways of doing things. I also say to people when we are onboarding a new customer, Nick, that if they are having some issues around this, hit the contact Raygun link and ask. We do have customer success folks and people supporting the product who can give guidance on how to get the most out of Raygun. So that's in there as well. Anyway, I'm going to jump back to my bit of a plan here. So I've kind of walked through some of this workflow. Three things really that I want to touch on is there is also support in here for mobile apps. So this is not common in web applications, but being able to do things like resolve in a given version. So let's say you fix this bug in version 2 and you're pushing version 2 to an app store. You don't want to have somebody who hasn't updated to version 2 to be causing a bug to keep returning to the active state. But if it reoccurs in, say, version 2.1, we sure as heck want it to bounce back to active automatically. So there is that capability there. The other thing that I like to suggest to people is around the workflow of how, once I've put Raygun crash reporting in, how do I make sure that we are continuing to improve the quality of our software, especially if I've got thousands of active bugs? What should I do? Well, the first thing I would say is forget about the count. The count is largely irrelevant. What we always care about, and I started the presentation with this, is our users. So you can sort this column here, and I always say jump in here, sort by the affected users, and grab the top 2 bugs, all right, and put them into your next sprint to get them resolved. And if you just repeat this process over and over, you can kind of see that over time, you're going to get down so that you are having, firstly, you're going to have maximum impact on human beings as possible at the start. And then over time, you're going to end up where that error rate is really coming down to the tune of, like I say, 90% is not uncommon. I've yet to see somebody manage to get to 0% and stay there, but I'm always up for people having a challenge. One last thing as well is all of the data in Raygun is fully sliceable and diceable. So by that I mean, let's say we look at the spike and we go, oh, what happened there? Well, we can drag over that, and you can see it's brought us right down to by the minute. We can actually render these charts down to by the second, and we've also pivoted all the data in these tables, including the headers. So we've put a lot of work into the back end here that even if you have tens of millions of issues, we can pivot the data. But wait, there's even more. We can add extra filtering. So I might say, you know what, I know we've had an issue recently in that spike, and it was something to do, and this is probably going to, now that I'm down to so few errors, backfire on me, but we'll say Chrome. So now we're pivoting on Chrome and within that tiny time window, and these are the actual numbers. And we can continue to build up these filters as well if we want in there. So you can do some pretty crazy cool stuff around the filtering. But that's kind of the way that I think about this page is, this is the one that the engineers have a look at and get a feel for things, maybe the product owners, maybe the project managers as well. But when the rubber really hits the road of fixing things, we want to drill into one of these bugs. And so I have one of these open already from earlier. And so in this case, when we drill in, the page is split up here. So on the right-hand side, you've got the aggregate information. So we're saying, okay, well, this bug in this time window here, which is 7 days, I believe, it's affected 36 users. Here's the trend over time. Here's the oldest one we've seen, the newest. And this is where stuff gets really cool. So because Raygun does track all the errors, it doesn't sample the data, it doesn't discard a whole bunch of it to save us money. It's all about giving you everything we can. We can actually tell you about the distribution of things. And so here you can see that this bug obviously occurs across pretty much every browser. But a really common situation that we see playing out is that an engineer says, I cannot recreate this bug, and then we'll be like, well, if you see it only happens in mobile Safari. And you're like, oh, I've got to test it on my iPhone. That sort of thing. It helps speed things up. Similarly, given that this is the client side, there's not a lot of machines involved, but we've had customers where they had a cluster of machines, and only when they moved to Raygun did they figure out that all of the errors were coming from just one server in their cluster. And once they took that server out, the error rate plummeted. So it's really great being able to get that aggregate data on the side. And then in the mid area here with the most space, we get the data that's really, really useful to software engineers. So firstly, we've got the summary tab. So this is the high level properties. Now, the cool thing about this is everybody has a different opinion on what's important data to them. And so we have a favoriting system. So under all of these tabs, if there's something that you particularly find useful when debugging, you can just flag it on and it will be on your summary tab. It only affects your login, not your colleagues. So you can choose whatever you want here. So you can kind of see the default in here. You can see that I am choosing to identify the user. Again, this is not real data. This is, so we're not outing any PII information here. And I'll go more into user data shortly. But we can jump through these other tabs here and really start to figure out, okay, what the heck was going on when this error occurred? And one of the things that I quite like is this breadcrumbs capability. So in here, we can actually see, and because this is a web error, and I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to say, just to remember, Raygun supports mobile apps, backend, web. I'm doing it with a website, but we collect information from everywhere that we can to help developers. But you can see the breadcrumbs here. So this is the activity that occurred in the web page leading up to the error. And so most of these are picked up automatically, like these lifecycle events. You can also inject your own breadcrumbs if that helps. And you can see here that the last thing that actually occurred was an API call to segment. I'm not going to even bring that out and see what information occurred there. So I'd probably have a pretty good idea here that if I could not recreate this issue easily on my machine, maybe I need to simulate that API call failing and see if the error occurs then. So this provides a really great help for developers in fixing bugs. And lastly, on the tab front, we have the raw data. So this is kind of an interesting one where this is the actual JSON payload that got sent to the Raygun service at the time of the error. And if you allow me, we actually put this in when we first launched Raygun because we wanted to make sure that all the data was actually being surfaced under these tabs. And then we took the tab away briefly and people lost their mind. And so we've put it back because it's really handy to see the raw information. We also let you download it. But it also has that benefit that if you are looking at maybe putting in Raygun, but you know that you have a security team that need to audit everything, this is a great opportunity where you can say, look, this is the raw data we give these guys, right? Like you can have a look in there and you tell me if there's anything that's problematic. All of our SDKs have filters that allow you to block out bits of information if you want to never send them to us. So it's really, really quite useful for that as well. And then up here, you can actually page through all of these reports. So if I wanted to go through all 204 instances, I could if I wanted to. And then the last one down here is, and we find this really useful at Raygun, is that team members can add comments. So they can jump in here and say, I think this is the segment API. Of course, it supports emoji because it can't be a good developer tool if it's not. And we can also @message different people on our team and it will alert them as well. So we can have a conversation. What's really cool about that, though, is that let's say we resolve this error and then in 2 years' time we regressed it for some reason. A new developer can jump in here and kind of see the conversation that had occurred against this bug and go, oh, okay. So also helping them fix things pretty quickly. Whew, that's a pretty intensive run through. Nick, is there anything you think I've missed out on this piece so far before I'm going to jump into dashboards next? But
I think it's pretty thorough. We have around 10 minutes left, so maybe we can jump into looking at a user and a dashboard.
Oh, yes, good point. So 36 users. So if I bring that up, I actually have one. This is where you have the opportunity to identify your users. And so here, under this one, we've used our SDK to call the set user function and expose who these people are. Now, we're not doing anything magical here. You have to know who they are to tell us who they are. Also be remiss in saying Raygun does not do anything questionable with your data. The way we think about our business is we're trying to build the tools that Google has internally and make them available to the next 50,000 companies. That doesn't mean that we take the data and provide it to anyone else, but I do know a lot of customers try to avoid this, and that's totally cool. But what's quite neat about this is I actually loaded up my user report here from our actual production system before. And when I drill in on a user, you can see it knows where I am. It can tell me the machines that I use when I'm using our software. It can also tell me all the sessions. So this data here from these two blocks comes from our real user monitoring system. And here's the errors. So when I loaded this page, you can see there's a time range up there. I've only had recently one error around a WebSocket, but you can see over time I've had 23 issues. So I can start to understand this user. I think I understand myself pretty well. A couple of things that are cool on this page. Firstly, this is the big red GDPR button. So if John Daniel Trask requests that he be removed from our system, I can go in here and this will actually allow me to completely take this user out of the system. But I also like being able to jump into the sessions. So especially when I'm trying to diagnose an issue or solve for something, I can click through on one of these and I can go, okay, let's see what JD did. And so you can see here, this was when I was on my Windows 10 desktop with Firefox. I was on here for 4 minutes and 1 second. And here's my navigation flow. So I was looking at the errors. I went back to the dashboard, then I went back to an error, and then I left. And you can see this is also overlaid the information about how long this took to load and how long I spent on the page looking at the information. And so I can drill in and see that about all the sessions. So we can tell you a lot about your users if you provide us with some of the information to help you better diagnose and understand how your fellow humans are using your software. So that's quite cool. The last thing I wanted to touch in the demo section of this webinar is our custom dashboards. So I'm going to jump over here. So up here in the app switcher, you can see we have dashboards. And so I'm just going to change it to a list. So I've got a few set up in the demo system. Again, it's all dummy data, but we'll use it anyway. So you can create these dashboards and they're live data. So you can see here, I've got a range of widgets showing. It's probably a bit of an information overload, but we can see load time distribution, session. You can see the time frames in here, how many sessions have been occurring in this app. But where this gets really cool, to give you an idea of what you can do with this, let's edit this thing. So firstly, there's a lot of different tiles for information that you might want to surface for yourself about your application. And then what you can do is you can also jump in and configure each of these. So you can see here, we want to see the errors over time for the past day. I want to see it, might leave it at 10-minute granularity. I can pull them from multiple applications within my account. I can assign their own colors. And so I can see those trends over time. I can also then choose to drag and drop some of these things around. I might decide to resize that one and move another one somewhere else. Somebody's going to kill me if I save these changes. But these dashboards look really great. I'm not going to save my changes, so I'm going to say yes for a bit. They look really great. They're live. And there's a TV mode too. So we actually do this at Raygun, where we have large screens around our office where we have some of these dashboards up showing site activity, application activity, those sorts of things. And it's really useful for just people to spot things and be like, hey, that something's looking a bit strange, or what's going on here, and trigger those conversations in real life. It's really important that we don't think of a software tool as being the whole answer. People and communication is always the answer, and Raygun is just surfacing information to help trigger those conversations. And so our dashboards are one way of doing that, which I think is really cool. And that's included in most accounts as well in there. Cool. So that's the users and the dashboards, Nick. I'm going to jump back to just do a quick wrap up for everybody. I hope that's been useful. Just jump in here simply. And I have this annoying bug that it always inverts this. So there we go. So just so you're aware, Raygun is used today by thousands of different organizations around the world. You're probably benefiting from Raygun several times a day with the software that you're using. We deal with tremendous volumes of data, but we've always got to remember why. As cool as it is to have some sort of sexy piece of dev kit, that we go and look at, why do we put this stuff in? Well, the big thing here is we want to spend much more time building our software rather than having to fix it. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Raygun. I don't want to spend more money on support than I have to, so that means wanting to be more bug-free. I don't want to see customers leave us because they have a bad experience, because that costs us money in marketing. We also just don't want people being unhappy. We want them to have great brand experiences. And we also want to provide data to the engineering team so they can quantify why we should fix some of these things. Now, at Raygun, I have a software engineering background, so I kind of get this, but I know a lot of customers sometimes have challenges articulating the why of some of these fixes up the chain to, say, less technical folks. That's where we can help quantify this stuff. And so there's examples here. It always blows my mind. The ROI on crash reporting is just ridiculous. I remember when we first built Raygun, and I identified at Christmas time where I was about to leave for my vacation, and I spotted a bug in a checkout flow of one of our sites. And if I hadn't had it tell me about that, I reckon we would have lost about $15,000 to $20,000 within a few days, even though that was a quiet time. At that point, these sorts of tools are helping me out immensely. And so there is a really strong return on investment. Don't just get it because it's cool. Or do. And that really wraps up the webinar today. I know I kind of ran through that really quickly across a lot of different things. I could have spent hours just talking about crash reporting. I did mention that we'll post this video online, so you can rewatch parts of it if you want. And if there's anything I've missed out, be sure to let us know, and we'll continue to do these so that we can deep dive into other parts of the system. Also, let us know if there's any parts of these that are working for you versus the parts that aren't. We're intending to do a lot more webinars in future. So I really appreciate your participation and your attendance. Thank you very much.